I died on a bitterly cold winter night. A swirl of snow blew across the cobblestones as I collapsed outside the grand estate that bore my name, but never truly belonged to me. Inside, I knew Alexander, my husband, was hosting another lavish gathering. The lights from the great hall glowed like distant stars while I lay on the frozen ground, breathing my last. No one came to save me. No gentle voice called my name. I had been invisible for so long in that house. Perhaps my absence was nothing but an afterthought. My heart raced erratically as darkness crowded my vision. I thought fleetingly of my youth, how I had once yearned for a true tender love, not this cold arrangement of convenience. But after years of betrayal, neglect, and illusions, I had become a mere shadow of myself. In my final moment I prayed for the chance to live differently. I wanted to feel the warmth of genuine affection, to choose a love that would sustain me rather than hollow me out. Then the world faded to black. When I next opened my eyes, the heavy tapestry of winter was gone, replaced by the gentle hush of spring rain against my childhood bedroom window. My heart pounded, disbelieving. I was alive again in a time before that fateful marriage. And so began my second life. A chance to reclaim what I had lost, to reject the loveless bond that had doomed me once. This time I would ignore Alexander's every attempt to secure me as his wife. I would marry for love no matter the consequences. Little did I know my rejection would change him. And soon he would become the one desperate for my attention. Chapter 1. A New Dawn. I remember the sensation of warmth streaming through the curtains as I awoke. My eyelids felt heavy, yet there was a distinct lightness in my body as though a suffocating weight had been lifted. At first my surroundings seemed like a fever dream. Gone were the gilded walls of Alexander's mansion, the immaculate hallways echoing with my silent footsteps. Instead, I found myself in the old bedroom I had occupied at my parents' home before my ill-fated marriage. The pink wallpaper with tiny rosebud patterns. The worn rug by the bed that my mother had once mended. Even the faint creak of the wooden floor as I swung my feet over the edge. I remembered it all vividly. But how? My trembling hand brushed the linen sheets, searching for an explanation. A pang of terror shot through me. Had my entire adulthood been just a nightmare? The mental images of winter, of the cold creeping into my bones, were still too real. I could recall the moment my heartbeat sputtered and my breath stilled under a night sky choked by snow. I closed my eyes, inhaling. The sweet fragrance of cherry blossoms wafted in from the open window. Spring. I died in the dead of winter. This is not possible. A knock at the door made me jolt. My mother's voice, gentle yet firm, carried through the wood. "Elena, are you awake? Breakfast is nearly ready." She was supposed to have fallen gravely ill a few years after my wedding to Alexander. I remembered standing at her bedside, helpless and alone as she breathed her last. Yet here she was, sounding vibrant and concerned, as if time had rewound to a simpler era. I rose unsteadily, stumbling to the mirror above the dresser. My reflection stared back, a younger version of myself, cheeks still round, eyes not yet dulled by sorrow. I tried to steady my breathing, the reality of a second life an impossible concept. Yet I felt it in every nerve, in every soft thud of my heart. I had been given a miracle. I had only one thought. Never again will I let that cold, lonely future become my fate. I dressed quickly, donning a simple cream-colored gown that hung in my closet. My mother had purchased it for me when I was barely out of girlhood. Now the fabric slid over my form as though it had been waiting for my return. Downstairs, the clink of cutlery and the aroma of fresh bread greeted me. My father glanced up from the table, wearing the same steady expression I remembered from my youth, a mixture of pride and sternness. My mother smiled as she served eggs onto my plate. "How did you sleep?" she asked, concern weaving through her every syllable. A cascade of emotions knotted my throat. "I slept well," I managed to say, blinking back tears. "Thank you, Mother." She laughed lightly. "Why so formal? You look as though you've seen a ghost, Elena. Are you feeling all right?" I swallowed thickly. "If only you knew." "I'm fine," I lied or half-lied. My hands shook slightly as I reached for my utensils. I felt more than fine. I felt resurrected. My father set aside his newspaper. "Elena, there's a celebration at the Rosebridge estate in 2 weeks. The Montclair family will be there. Your friend Julia mentioned she hoped you'd attend." Julia. My heart lifted at the name. In my previous life she had been a steadfast companion, the only person who never abandoned me, even when I found myself married to a man who barely acknowledged my existence. I had lost touch with her eventually, overshadowed by the chaos of that household. I nodded, forcing a small smile. Yes, of course, father. I would love to see Julia. Deep inside, a new surge of determination built. I was going to live this life on my own terms. If that meant I'd never stand at the altar with Alexander again, so be it. I had no intention of chaining myself to a loveless marriage. Somewhere in that old future I had perished under the weight of heartbreak. Now, in this bright morning of a second beginning, I vowed, I will find true love or I will stay alone. But I will never marry for obligation again. Chapter 2, Remembering the Past. After breakfast, I slipped outside to the backyard garden where the early spring sunshine filtered through budding leaves. Every breath I took felt like a gift. I reached out to touch the branches of an old oak tree under which I used to sit during my childhood daydreams. The bark was rough beneath my fingers, grounding me in this new reality. Though the day was radiant, my thoughts turned dark with recollection. I had married Alexander Hartford at 19. My father, eager to forge ties with the prestigious Hartford family, urged me to accept the proposal. Alexander appeared polished, a man with wealth, social standing, and an air of refinement. Naively, I believed we could grow to love each other. I believed I could coax warmth from his cool exterior. But behind the mansion's grand facade lay neglect so profound it still haunted me. He spent days, weeks, sometimes, away from home forging business deals across the country. When he returned, it was not to see me but to finalize contracts with wealthy associates in his study. If he ever remembered I existed, it was only to scold me for trivial matters, or to remind me of some social event we were obligated to attend. I had tried everything: smiles, small gestures of kindness, gentle conversations by the fireplace. Nothing thawed him. Eventually, I retreated into a desperate silence. The staff pitied me, yet no one intervened. I was the lonely mistress of a household that did not want me. That loneliness had reached its peak when I discovered he had quietly supported another woman, a rumored paramour. Perhaps he did not love her either, but the idea that he had given her even a fraction of the warmth he withheld from me felt like a betrayal that cut to the core. And so, my life wasted away in that cavernous house, my existence becoming more ghost-like by the day. By the time I collapsed in the snow outside those gates, there was nothing left but sorrow. But now, as I inhaled the crisp spring air, I found that sorrow laced with fresh resolve. Alexander Hartford might come knocking again. My father might be tempted by the same proposal, the same promise of wealth and status. But I had changed. My heart was no longer naive. I wouldn't be trapped by illusions of acceptance. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves. I closed my eyes, letting that cool air wash over me. I thought of the future that lay before me, uncharted territory that I could shape with my choices. This time I would chase real happiness, not a gilded cage. And if Alexander tried to chain me to him again, I would simply refuse. Chapter 3, A Chance Encounter. The following days passed like a dream, each morning layering my new reality with more certainty. My mother and father, noticing my improved mood, seemed pleased, though occasionally they exchanged puzzled glances as if uncertain about the sudden spark in my demeanor. One afternoon I ventured into town to purchase art supplies. In my previous life I had given up painting soon after my wedding. Alexander had called it a childish hobby, and in my despair I let that creative part of me die. Now I felt the urge to resurrect it. I strolled along the main street, past flower vendors displaying bright tulips, their colors heralding the advent of spring. The sun warmed my shoulders. I felt alive in a way I never had before, even as passers-by hurried about their business. When I stepped into the art supply store, the subtle scent of paint and parchment enveloped me. An older gentleman, the proprietor, greeted me warmly. I wandered the aisles, running my fingers over charcoal pencils, brushes, and pristine canvases. A glimmer of excitement flickered in my chest. This, I realized, was the beginning of a life truly my own. As I neared the checkout counter with my purchases, the bell above the door chimed. Instinctively, I glanced over and saw him. A tall man with warm brown hair brushed back in a neat style, wearing a simple yet refined coat. Our eyes met. He paused, a polite smile touching his lips. Then he headed for the display of paintbrushes. I had never seen him before, or so I thought, But something about his presence was strangely comforting, like the final chord of a song that had been missing for too long. I tried not to stare, but my gaze kept drifting back. He exuded a gentle confidence, a warmth in his expression that was genuine and not forced. For a moment our eyes locked again and I felt my cheeks grow hot. After I paid for my items, I was turning to leave when the proprietor called, "Graham, have you found your brushes yet?" The man, Graham, gave a brief nod and handed over a few high-quality brushes. I lingered, curiosity tugging at me. He thanked the store owner and turned to depart, but when he saw me standing near the door he paused. "You have an interest in painting?" he asked in a cordial tone, nodding at the art supplies in my arms. I swallowed. "Yes. I've always loved it, but I haven't painted in a while." His smile broadened. "It's never too late to rekindle something that brings you joy." There was a warm sincerity in his voice that took me by surprise. I nodded, feeling awkward but oddly delighted. "That's what I thought too. I'm Graham Foster." He introduced himself with a small bow of his head. "It's nice to meet someone else who enjoys art." I carefully shifted my packages so I could dip a small curtsy. "Elena Hathaway. A pleasure." "It's a lovely day," Graham noted, gesturing to the sunlit street outside. "Enjoy it while it lasts, Miss Hathaway. Spring weather can be fickle." With a last friendly nod, he departed, leaving me standing there with my heart thudding in my chest. I watched him walk away, a mild breeze ruffling his coat. For the first time in ages, I felt a surge of hope that wasn't tied to forced social niceties or blind duty. As I stepped out onto the main street, the world seemed a little brighter, the sun a little kinder. Chapter 4. The Rosebridge Celebration. A week later, my family and I traveled by carriage to the Rosebridge estate, where a spring celebration was being held. My friend Julia Montclair had written to me excitedly about the event. She teased that the gardens were in full bloom and that there would be dancing under lanterns at dusk. I hadn't been to a formal gathering since my rebirth. In my past life, I recalled how such events typically left me anxious. Opportunities for Alexander to parade his connections, or for me to stand in the corner, unnoticed. But this time, as we arrived at the estate's sweeping driveway, I resolved to enjoy every moment. I stepped out of the carriage and gazed up at the mansion's grand columns, draped with lilac blossoms. The air was perfumed with the scent of wisteria. Inside, the main hall bustled with guests clad in elegant dresses and tailored suits. My father and mother greeted acquaintances, exchanging pleasantries. I scanned the crowd, searching for Julia's familiar dark hair. "Elena," a voice cried. Then I felt arms wrap around me, nearly knocking me off balance. I laughed as I recognized Julia, her brown eyes sparkling. "It's been too long." I hugged her back. "Yes. Thank you for inviting us." She pulled back, taking a moment to examine my face. "You look different. Happier." I hesitated, a smile curving my lips. "I feel as though I've been given another chance at life." She raised an eyebrow. "Well, it suits you. Come, let me show you the gardens." We walked through the ornate French doors leading outside, where manicured lawns stretched out beneath the evening sun. Lanterns were already being hung in the trees for the night's festivities. Julia looped her arm through mine, chatting animatedly about her travels abroad. I listened, content to bask in this warmth of friendship. Suddenly, in the distance, I spotted a figure leaning against a marble balustrade. My heart skipped. It was Graham Foster, dressed in a formal vest and jacket, his posture relaxed as he observed the lively crowd. The sunlight caught the warmth in his brown hair and he seemed lost in thought. Without warning, Julia gave me a sly grin. "Noticed someone, did you?" I turned pink. "I met him in the art supply store the other day. He seemed nice." She patted my hand. "Graham is a dear friend of my brother's. Quiet but incredibly kind. You should go say hello." Before I could object, she escorted me over to him. Graham straightened at our approach, a smile lighting his features. "Miss Montclair," he greeted Julia, then turned to me with a polite bow. "And Miss Hathaway. Good to see you again." Julia, ever the charmer, introduced us more formally. I sensed a spark of amusement in her eyes. Perhaps she saw something in Graham and me that I, in my cautious state, wasn't ready to name. As the three of us chatted, I was struck by Graham's calm presence, the way his words felt deliberate yet caring. He asked about my art supplies, whether I'd started painting again. I admitted I had done a few sketches, but I was still reacquainting myself with my long-ignored passion. He nodded thoughtfully. Art can be like a mirror reflecting not just what we see but what we feel. Sometimes, we uncover truths we didn't realize were inside us. His words resonated deeply. Before I could respond, Julia excused herself, claiming she needed to greet other guests. She left us by the balustrade as the setting sun cast a golden glow over the garden. A comfortable silence stretched between us. I found my gaze lingering on Graham's profile, the relaxed line of his shoulders. Unlike Alexander's distant, hard-edged demeanor, Graham exuded a quiet warmth that made me feel at ease. "I'm glad I came to this celebration," I said softly. He smiled. "So am I." For a moment, the low hum of conversation and the chirping of birds blended together. My heart fluttered. This wasn't love at first sight, I was far too jaded for that. But it was something close to genuine connection, a sense of possibility I had lost in my old life. As night fell and the lanterns illuminated the garden, I stayed by Graham's side, talking about books, art and fleeting childhood dreams. Underneath the soft glow of paper lanterns, my old self, the one who died in the snow, felt more and more like a distant nightmare. Chapter 5. Rumors of a Proposal. Days turned into weeks. The memory of the Rosebridge celebration lingered like a sweet perfume, buoying my spirits. I continued painting, meeting Graham occasionally in town. Our conversations were unhurried, each encounter revealing more of his gentle intelligence. I felt a stirring within me, a mix of curiosity and cautious excitement. Was I walking a path toward the kind of love I'd always wanted? Perhaps. Yet an unease emerged whenever Father dropped hints about potential suitors. One afternoon I discovered the source of his cryptic smiles and searching glances. "Elena," he said over tea, "I received word that Alexander Hartford has returned from his travels abroad. He might attend next month's charity gala." My teacup clattered in its saucer. Alexander Hartford. The name reverberated through me, a ghost from the future I had escaped. Father continued, oblivious to my stiffened posture. "I've heard rumors he's seeking a wife. The Hartford family is quite wealthy, you know, and I understand his father is pushing him to settle down soon." He paused meaningfully. "It could be an advantageous connection for our family." The blood pounded in my ears. I took a measured breath. "Father, I appreciate your concern for our family's prosperity, but I have no interest in meeting Mr. Hartford." Surprise flickered across his features. "What do you mean? You haven't even seen the man yet." "I have seen him. I've lived with him, died because of his indifference." Of course I couldn't reveal that. Instead I forced a polite tone. "I don't believe we would be compatible." A faint frown deepened the lines on his brow. "Elena, you've never turned away from a prospect so quickly. I expected you to at least speak with him." Memories of Alexander's cold expressions and dismissive words flared in my mind. My heart constricted as if a steel band were wrapped around it. "Father, please trust me on this." He sighed, setting down his teacup. "We will see. I only ask that you keep an open mind. The gala is an important event for our social standing." I nodded stiffly, but inside I seethed. I could almost feel Alexander's approach like a thunderstorm on the horizon, ready to unleash havoc on the life I was carefully nurturing. But this time I wasn't the naive girl who tiptoed around her husband's moods. I had tasted freedom. I had glimpsed a possible future with a man who actually saw me. I refused to let my father or society corner me into that cold marriage again. If Alexander dared propose, I would be the one to reject him. Chapter 6. Spiraling Threads of the Past Flashback. A few nights later, sleep eluded me. Restless, I found myself pacing my bedroom, lit only by the flickering glow of a bedside candle. The hush of midnight pressed against the windows, and my mind drifted back to the final months of my previous life. I saw myself sitting alone in a parlor of the Hartford mansion, staring at a clock that ticked too loudly in the silence. The staff moved in hushed steps as though we were in perpetual mourning. Alexander was away on a business trip again, this time for more than a month. No letters, no messages, no signs of concern for me. I had tried to busy myself with embroidery, reading, anything to stave off the gnawing emptiness. Still every day felt longer than the last. My mother was ill by then, too far away to visit often. My father had grown distant, pleased only that his daughter had married into a prominent family. Then came the rumors, snide whispers from the staff about Alexander's companion on his journeys, a certain widow rumored to hold a claim over his heart. I would catch glimpses of them together whenever Alexander returned. How his gaze drifted past me but rested on her with a faint warmth. Each time it felt like a fresh betrayal. I remembered confronting him once. My voice trembled, but I demanded the truth. Did he have feelings for her? Were we truly husband and wife, or was I just an accessory to the Hartford name? He regarded me with icy detachment as though I were a troublesome child. "Elena, you agreed to this marriage," he said, his tone devoid of empathy. "Our families benefit from our union. That should be enough." That conversation ended with my tears soaking into the embroidered rug. He had left me alone in that room. My last thread of hope snapped. I returned to the present, breathing shakily. In this new life I would never again let him speak to me that way. I refused to endure that heartbreak a second time. If only these memories would stop haunting me at every turn. Yet perhaps they served a purpose, sharpening my resolve. I had been given a second chance to reclaim my dignity, to choose love instead of captivity. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. Younger, unburdened by the heavy lines of sorrow. Though tears threatened to pool in my eyes, I inhaled deeply and vowed once more, never again. Chapter 7. The Unexpected Guest. Time crept closer to the charity gala. My mother fretted over dresses, wanting me to look my best. My father insisted I practice my dance steps, in case I had to waltz with potential suitors. I humored them both, inwardly steeling myself for any encounter with Alexander. On the day of the event, I dressed in a flowing pale blue gown, the silk catching the light with every step. Julia arrived at our home in her own carriage, intending for us to travel together. She gasped at my appearance. "Elena, you look radiant," she exclaimed, clasping my hands. "Thank you," I replied, managing a gentle smile. During the ride, Julia chattered about the people likely to attend. Well-connected families, a handful of affluent entrepreneurs, and of course the Hartford circle. Despite my best attempts to remain calm, anxiety gnawed at my stomach. When we arrived, the grand ballroom was already alive with music and soft laughter. Chandeliers glimmered overhead, and couples swirled across the polished floor in graceful arcs. Refreshments lined a table draped in white linen, while footmen carried trays of champagne. I scanned the crowd, bracing myself for the sight of Alexander's tall, imposing figure. But instead my gaze found Graham standing near a gilded column, conversing with another gentleman. He seemed relaxed yet elegant in a tailored black suit. The sight of him slowed the frantic pounding of my heart. Julia nudged me playfully. "Go say hello. I'll catch up with you later." I crossed the room, carefully navigating through the throng of guests. Graham glanced up as I approached, his expression brightening. "Miss Hathaway," he greeted warmly. "It's good to see you." I curtsied with a light heart. "Likewise, Mr. Foster." He introduced me to his acquaintance, a fellow art enthusiast, and I felt the tension in my muscles ease. For a few precious moments, we spoke of benign topics. Recent paintings, the gallery opening scheduled for summer, the subtle differences between oil and watercolor. With Graham, I was not on display, not forced to be charming for the sake of a title or alliance. Suddenly, a hush fell over the crowd, as though a ripple of heightened interest spread from the ballroom entrance. I didn't have to look to know who had arrived. My stomach twisted. Alexander Hartford. He strode inside with practiced poise, wearing a perfectly fitted suit that made him stand out like a hawk among doves. His gaze swept the room, an air of quiet arrogance in every movement. Despite my best efforts, I felt a chill creep up my spine, haunted by memories of the life we once shared. I tightened my hold on the glass in my hand, hoping it wouldn't betray me by rattling. Graham must have sensed my unease because he leaned closer. "Are you all right?" he asked in a soft undertone. I forced a nod, though my pulse hammered. "Yes, just felt a bit faint for a moment." Alexander's eyes continued surveying the ballroom, pausing to greet select individuals with a polite, distant smile. Then inevitably his gaze found me. Even across the expanse of the dance floor, I could see the subtle narrowing of his eyes. A flash of something, surprise, recognition, curiosity, crossed his face. Quietly I willed myself to remain calm. He does not own me. I owe him nothing. As if in response to my silent resolve, Graham offered his arm. "Shall we get some fresh air on the terrace?" he suggested gently. Exhaled grateful. "Yes. That would be lovely." With that we left the ballroom, stepping into the cool evening air. The terrace overlooked a sprawling garden lit by subtle lanterns. I leaned against the stone balustrade, letting the night breeze soothe my frayed nerves. Graham stood beside me in comfortable silence. Eventually he turned, a question in his expression. "I apologize if I've overstepped, but you seemed uncomfortable. Was it because of that man?" My stomach clenched. The temptation to confide in Graham tugged at me, to let him know the depth of Alexander's significance in my life. But was that too much too soon? Instead I answered carefully. "He's an acquaintance. Our families have some history." Graham studied me for a moment, then nodded without pressing further. His quiet acceptance of my reluctance to elaborate was a relief, another contrast to Alexander, who would have demanded answers if it suited his interests. We lingered there, letting the hush of the gardens envelop us. Despite my fear, I felt safe next to Graham. When we finally re-entered the ballroom, I discovered that Alexander had moved to the opposite end, engaged in conversation with a dignitary. He hadn't approached me yet, but I could sense that it was only a matter of time. Chapter 8. Confrontation. My dread proved correct. The next afternoon my parents announced we had a guest. Alexander Hartford had arrived unannounced to pay his respects. My father greeted him with enthusiasm, extolling the virtues of my mother's hospitality. I stood in the foyer, my heart thudding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. Alexander offered a shallow bow, his steel-gray eyes observing me too closely. He was just as I remembered. Tall, perfectly composed, and exuding an aura of wealth and entitlement. "Miss Hathaway," he said, voice calm. "It's been some time since I've had the pleasure of your company." I bit back a retort that we had never truly had pleasure in each other's company at all. Instead I dipped into a stiff curtsy. "Mr. Hartford, welcome." My father steered us into the drawing room. The conversation was stilted, a show of forced politeness. Alexander sipped his tea, complimenting the decor and the weather, all while casting sidelong glances at me as though trying to unravel a mystery. Perhaps in his eyes I was a puzzle. My father, meanwhile, beamed, no doubt envisioning the potential alliance. Finally, Alexander set his teacup down. "Miss Hathaway, would you do me the honor of accompanying me for a stroll in the garden?" I wanted to refuse, but father's hopeful expression pinned me in place. Resigned, I nodded. "Certainly." We stepped out onto the garden path, the afternoon sun illuminating the rose bushes and hedges. Alexander walked a pace behind me at first, then drew level. "I haven't seen you at many social functions," he commented in that too calm tone. "It's unlike the other young ladies who rush to meet eligible suitors." A flicker of annoyance sparked inside me. "I've been occupied with personal interests." His gaze rested on my face, uncomfortably intense. "You've changed." If only he knew the half of it. "People do change," I said quietly, forcing a neutral expression. "You're the same, though, always carrying yourself with perfect composure." He tilted his head. "Is that meant as a compliment?" I shrugged, refusing to let him control the conversation. "Simply an observation, Mr. Hartford." We reached the far end of the garden where a small fountain trickled. Alexander halted, turning to me. The faint scent of roses clung to the air, an odd contrast to the tension between us. "I've heard from several people that you have no interest in suitors," he said. "That you have refused to entertain proposals." My chest tightened. Rumors travel quickly. He studied me, a hint of frustration flickering in his eyes. "Your father implied you might be reluctant to consider marriage at the moment. May I ask why?" Anger bubbled. How dare he question me about my personal choices when in another life, he had been the epitome of an unfeeling husband. But I swallowed that rage. He didn't recall any of those events. Only I did. Why should I rush into something that might bring me no joy? I replied, my voice colder than I intended. "I have the right to be cautious." A muscle in his jaw tightened. Silence stretched between us, brittle as glass. Finally, he spoke softly. "Perhaps you think all marriages are devoid of affection. Not all of them are. Mine would not be." I almost laughed. Instead, I forced a tense smile, ignoring the thunder in my chest. Thank you for the reassurance, Mr. Hartford, but I'm quite content as I am. His brow furrowed as if he couldn't fathom why I wasn't enamored by his status or words. In my past life, I might have been awed by his wealth and the possibility of securing my family's fortunes. But now, with the memory of heartbreak still raw, I felt nothing but resolve. Good day, Mr. Hartford, I said, turning on my heel. I believe we've had enough fresh air. He stood there, silent as I walked away. Though my steps were steady, my heart was in turmoil. The confrontation had been civil on the surface, but each word exchanged felt like a stab at old wounds. Chapter 9. Torn Choices. In the weeks that followed, Alexander grew more persistent. He sent invitations for carriage rides, luncheons, even an art exhibit. I declined them all. My father's patience began to wear thin. He confronted me in his study one morning, newspapers and letters spread across his desk. "Elena," he admonished, "you are causing quite a stir by refusing Mr. Hartford's invitations. He is an eligible, respectable man. Many young women would be honored to receive his attentions." I stood opposite him, arms folded tightly. "Father, I have no wish to be that honored young woman. I've told you this before." He gestured to the letters, frustration evident in his voice. "You're turning away a chance that could benefit our entire family. The Hartford estate is expansive, their influence undeniable. Alexander has personally expressed admiration for you." "Admiration," I repeated bitterly. "If only you knew the lie behind that word." Father sighed, sinking into his leather chair. "Are you set on refusing all prospects then? Do you mean to remain unmarried?" A pang of hurt shot through me, recalling how I had once felt worthless, overshadowed by Alexander's dismissive attitude. But now there was Graham quietly supporting me at every turn. I didn't want to live a life shackled by status. I yearned for love that breathed warmth into every day. I lifted my chin. If I marry, it will be a man of my choosing. Not an arrangement forced by social pressures or family alliances. He shook his head as though my stance was incomprehensible. "You've grown willful, Elena." I offered no reply. Inside, my heart pounded with a mixture of fear and longing. Fear of disappointing my father, but longing for a freedom I had only recently tasted. As I left the study, I nearly bumped into my mother. Concern filled her eyes. She touched my shoulder gently. "Elena, I only wish for your happiness." Tears stung at the back of my eyes. "I know, Mother. But my happiness can't be bargained or sold." She nodded, sympathy and uncertainty blending on her face. "Just be careful. Your father is under a lot of pressure from the outside. The world isn't always kind to women who defy expectations." I nodded, understanding too well the delicate path I was treading. But the memory of dying in the snow, friendless and loveless, fueled me. No matter what anyone said, I wouldn't return to that fate. Chapter 10. The Heart Grows Fonder. Meanwhile, Graham's presence in my life grew quietly stronger. We found moments to meet in town, sometimes to discuss art techniques or to browse the local bookshop. Other times we simply strolled through the park, enjoying the mild spring air. Our bond wasn't dramatic or lightning fast, but it was comforting. I felt seen, heard, cherished in a way I'd never experienced. Each time I spotted him in a crowd, a tiny thrill fluttered through me. One afternoon we stood by the riverbank, watching swans glide across the gentle current. The sky was overcast, hinting at an approaching rainstorm. Graham kept his hands tucked in his coat pockets, his expression thoughtful. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he said softly, turning to face me. My heart lurched. "Yes." He hesitated, as though selecting his words carefully. "I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel as though I found a kindred spirit in you, Elena. Someone who looks at the world with genuine curiosity and a desire for beauty." Heat rushed to my cheeks. I feel the same. I've never been able to speak so openly about my dreams and fears with anyone else. A smile tugged at his lips. "Do you suppose I might call on you at your home? I'd like to speak with your family, formally." A swirl of emotion seized me. I knew what he implied. Courtship. The possibility of a real, heartfelt relationship, leading to marriage if we both wished it. After my father's repeated attempts to push me into Alexander's arms, this felt like a miracle. I drew a shaky breath. "I would like that very much, Graham." He reached out and gently took my hand. His warm, steady touch reassured me more than words ever could. "Thank you," he whispered. Just then, thunder rumbled in the distance and droplets began to fall. We laughed, taking shelter under a large willow tree by the river's edge. My skirt brushed against his boots, rain tapping on the leaves overhead. "I suppose we'll get soaked," he remarked, his voice tinged with amusement. I looked up, meeting his soft brown eyes. "I don't mind," I murmured. "Not if I'm with you." He blinked, momentarily taken aback by my candor. Then a gentle smile graced his features. Neither of us spoke. The hush of rain and the closeness of our bodies said enough. In that moment, I realized how desperately I craved a love that made life glow from within. Had I ever felt such warmth in my old life? Never. But now, standing under a willow tree in a soft drizzle, I believed in the possibility of a future built on affection rather than duty. Chapter 11. The Proposal That Wasn't Mine. A week later, word spread throughout town. Alexander Hartford had made a formal proposal to me by letter, delivered to our home with pomp and ceremony. My father read it at the dinner table, glowing with pride. My mother's eyes darted nervously between my father and me, aware of the tension. I stared at the piece of parchment as though it were a viper coiled to strike. The words were eloquent but hollow. An offer of a marriage that promised financial security, social prestige, and a life of comfort. Nowhere did Alexander mention love or companionship, only the strategic advantages our union would bring. My father set the letter down. "This is an opportunity, Elena. The Hartford family is willing to expedite the wedding arrangements if you accept." I forced my trembling hands to remain in my lap. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, father, but my answer is no." He bristled. "Elena, you will at least meet with Mr. Hartford to discuss this in person. I won't have you dismiss him so flippantly. He's come a long way and his father is an influential man." I opened my mouth to protest, but the sharpness in his gaze silenced me. He stood, the letter clenched in his fist, and marched out, leaving the table in heavy silence. My mother reached over to squeeze my hand. "Perhaps meet him once more, dear," she whispered. "If only to put your father's mind at ease. Then if you still refuse, he may not object so strongly." Reluctantly I nodded. I would endure one final conversation with Alexander, if that would end my father's insistence. I harbored a slim hope that Alexander would see the futility of pursuing a woman who held no admiration for him. Soon enough, an evening meeting was arranged. I waited in our drawing room, wearing a simple lavender dress and a stony expression. Alexander arrived, bowing stiffly to me before my parents withdrew to give us privacy. He took a seat on the opposite sofa, crossing his legs with poised confidence. "Miss Hathaway," he said, "thank you for agreeing to see me." I sat upright, folded my hands in my lap. "You've made your proposal in writing, Mr. Hartford. I'm sure you know my stance by now." He studied me, his steel-gray eyes piercing. "Why do you reject me so adamantly? We are both from well-respected families. Our marriage would bring advantage not just to ourselves but to many people who depend on us. Is that not enough?" Memories of my old life surfaced, each more painful than the last. The bitter nights spent alone in a chilly bed, the humiliating knowledge that he had time for everyone except his wife, the final heartbreak in the falling snow. "No," I answered, voice shaking with pent-up rage and sorrow. "It's not enough. I want affection, mutual respect, genuine companionship. I don't want to spend my days as a stranger in my own home." Alexander leaned forward, confusion etched on his features. "You speak as though you know me better than I know myself." "I do." I swallowed the bitter truth. "I only know that you have offered me everything except the one thing that matters. Love." He glanced away, jaw taut. "Love can grow over time. Or it might never grow at all," I countered, leaving me trapped and miserable. A tense silence settled. I saw anger flash in his eyes, anger or frustration that his usual approach wasn't swaying me. In my old life, perhaps I had married him just to please my father or because I believed things would change. This time I was older in spirit, too scarred to repeat that mistake. Finally he exhaled. "You are stubborn, Miss Hathaway." I met his gaze squarely. "Yes, I am. And I have that right." Alexander stood, smoothing an imperceptible crease from his suit. "Very well. I can see you're not prepared to accept this offer at the moment." He paused, hesitating. Then, in a voice softened by something akin to regret, he added, "I will not give up so easily." My heart lurched, but I kept my face impassive. "Do as you wish, Mr. Hartford, but know that my resolve will not change." With that, he left the room, his footsteps echoing through the hallway. I released a shaky breath, realizing I had been tense to the point of pain. I closed my eyes, the candlelight flickering behind my eyelids. Never again. Chapter 12. A Love Chosen Freely. Days later, Graham requested a private audience with my father, expressing his intention to court me in earnest. My father listened politely, though I saw the doubt in his eyes. Graham lacked the Hartford name, the bottomless coffers, and the influential ties. But he possessed a gentle heart and an unwavering respect for me, qualities far more precious to me than any fortune. When Graham emerged from the study, I rushed to him, searching his face for reassurance. He gave me a crooked smile. "Your father is cautious. He worries about financial security, about whether I can provide the lifestyle he desires for you." Bitterness twisted in my chest. "I'm not a commodity." He placed his hands on my shoulders, his warm palms comforting. "I made it clear that I love you, and that I can offer you a life of mutual respect and genuine care. Wealth, perhaps not to the same degree as the Hartford family, but enough." Tears threatened to gather in my eyes. "Love," I repeated softly. "Do you truly mean it, Graham?" He brushed a knuckle along my cheek, a gesture so tender it made my heart flutter. "With all my soul, Elena." In that moment, I realized how starved I was for those words. The very words I had never heard from Alexander. All the wealth in the world could not replace this feeling of being treasured. My father walked out then, eyeing us with a mixture of worry and resignation. "If this is your wish, Elena, I will not stand in your way. But think carefully. If you choose Mr. Foster over Mr. Hartford, you lose a mighty opportunity." I met my father's gaze, unwavering. "I've already made my choice." Graham squeezed my hand gently. "Thank you," he whispered. I managed a trembling smile. "No, Graham, thank you for giving me hope." And just like that, I stood at the threshold of my own future. Alexander's looming presence would not disappear overnight, but for now, I held on to the promise of a real, loving bond with Graham, a possibility I had once thought beyond my reach. Chapter 13. A Storm of Consequences. News spread quickly. I, Elena Hathaway, had accepted the courtship of Graham Foster, effectively declining Alexander Hartford. To say it caused a stir would be an understatement. My father received numerous letters questioning my judgment, even my sanity. My friends were divided. Some applauded my bold stance. Others whispered that I had thrown away a golden opportunity. Alexander, true to his word, did not quietly slink away. One afternoon, I found him waiting outside my family's home. The footman announced his presence with a wary expression. I considered ignoring him, but a peculiar sense of finality compelled me to speak to him one last time. Stepping onto the porch, I found Alexander standing there, tension radiating through his posture. He cut straight to the point. "I've heard you have accepted another man's proposal of courtship." I raised my chin. "Yes, Mr. Hartford. I have." His mouth pressed into a thin line. "Do you truly believe he can offer you a better life than I can?" A wave of frustration collided with my sense of composure. "This is not about material wealth, Alexander. It's about who respects me, who cares for me. I would rather live modestly in a loving partnership than lavishly in a cold, empty house." He exhaled sharply as though struggling to maintain his aloof facade. "I could learn to care for you, if you would give me the chance. I gave you a lifetime of chances," I wanted to shout. My eyes burned with angry tears, but I refused to let them fall. "I'm sorry," I said simply, voice trembling. "I cannot offer you what you seek." For a moment, I thought I saw genuine pain flicker across his face. Something that might have been regret if we lived in a world where he had truly changed. But I knew better. Alexander Hartford wanted me now only because I had dared to reject him. That realization stirred pity within me, not love. He stared at me for several heartbeats, each second heavy with the finality of my decision. Then, without another word, he turned and descended the porch steps. As he disappeared down the driveway, I felt a surge of relief so profound it left me shaking. My father might be disappointed and the world might talk, but I was free. Free to choose my own destiny, to rewrite the ending that once claimed my life. Chapter 14. A wedding of the heart. Summer arrived, golden and warm, bringing with it a quiet happiness I had never known. My father, though not fully reconciled to my choice, gave his reluctant blessing for my marriage to Graham Foster. My mother, seeing my genuine joy, supported me wholeheartedly. The ceremony was simple, held in the chapel behind the Foster family home. I wore a gown of pale ivory, my hair woven with small blossoms. Graham waited at the altar, looking impossibly handsome in a tailored suit. I walked toward him, my heart a flurry of emotions. Gratitude, excitement, and an echo of disbelief that I had reached this day, a wedding I actually wanted. Julia was my bridesmaid, beaming with joy. Soft sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting the chapel floor in hues of rose and gold. The Reverend's voice resonated gently, speaking of love's enduring power and the commitment we were about to make. When Graham and I exchanged vows, my voice wavered, tears catching in my throat. These were not the forced promises of a contract. They were words spoken from the depths of my heart, a testament to a love we had nurtured. He slipped a ring onto my finger, simple and unadorned, but more precious to me than any gem. I felt warmth bloom in my chest, tears sliding down my cheeks. Then his lips touched mine in a tender kiss, sealing the bond we had chosen for ourselves. Afterward, in the small reception, friends and family offered their congratulations. Julia teased us about painting a portrait of our wedding day. My father, though subdued, hugged me and whispered, "I wish you happiness, my daughter." I glanced around the gathering, half expecting Alexander to appear uninvited. But he was nowhere to be found. Perhaps he had finally accepted my decision. Or perhaps he was nursing his wounded pride far away. Either way, his absence was a final blessing. In that moment, I felt as if I had stepped out of one fate and into another. My heart overflowed with gratitude. This was the life I had died yearning for. This was the love I never found in my past. Epilogue. A quiet, fulfilling tomorrow. Weeks turned into months, and autumn arrived in a flourish of red and gold. Graham and I settled into a modest but cozy home on the outskirts of town. Sunlight streamed through the windows each morning, rousing us gently to a new day. We often painted side by side in a small studio, exchanging ideas and critiquing each other's work with playful banter. Occasionally, news of Alexander Hartford drifted in through social circles. Rumors of his business expansions, whispers of him courting another heiress. I felt no bitterness, only a mild curiosity. I hoped, in a distant way, that he might find whatever it was he truly sought, although I suspected he yearned more for conquest than for real attachment. One crisp afternoon, I strolled through the orchard behind our home, leaves crunching beneath my shoes. The fragrance of ripe apples filled the air. A gentle wind tugged at my shawl. Graham joined me, slipping an arm around my waist. "Thinking about something?" he asked softly, pressing a kiss to my temple. "I was thinking about second chances," I admitted, leaning into his warmth. "And how grateful I am to have found you." He laughed softly. "You make it sound like fate, but I think we simply recognized something in each other that we were both missing." I turned to him, heart swelling with emotion. "I was missing love," I whispered. Graham's eyes softened. "And now?" I smiled, lifting my gaze to the vibrant canopy overhead. "Now I'm overflowing with it." We walked together through the orchard, our footsteps gentle in the rustling leaves. There were times when I still recalled the bitter taste of my former life, the final moments in the snow, the heartbreak that had once shackled me. Yet those memories no longer dominated me. They were the shadows that reminded me to treasure the sunlight I had now. And so, my second life found its resolution, not in the arms of a powerful but distant husband, nor in the grand halls of an estate that mocked my loneliness, but in the shared laughter of simpler spaces, in the brushstrokes of a painting crafted side by side, and in the quiet, steady pulse of a genuine love. Perhaps regrets might linger, remnants of a past that could never truly be forgotten. But I had proven that fate was not unchangeable, that the heart could triumph over even the weightiest burdens of duty and despair. I once died believing I was forever condemned to emptiness, I reflected, glancing at the man walking beside me. But now I live again, and this time I have chosen to love, and to be loved, in return. In that gentle autumn breeze I closed my eyes, letting the moment settle into my soul. Tomorrow would arrive with new challenges and fresh joys, but I knew that I would meet them without fear. My heart had found its sanctuary, and my rebirth had not been in vain.